So we're going to dive into Kontakt here, and all the stuff that we just talked about, we're going to take a look at that over here in Kontakt. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all these tracks. Hit delete on these, and we're going to go ahead and load in Kontakt. So I'm going to grab my instrument, I'm going to grab my Kontakt VST from up here. Here it is. Let that load in here. Alright, so this is Kontakt, and what we can see here is over on the left hand side we have all our instruments, libraries, things like that. These are the instrument sounds that come with Complete. So if you have Complete, and I've got the Complete Ultimate Collector's Edition, so it's just got tons and tons of sounds here, and any kind of instruments that you buy, third-party instruments that you buy that use Kontakt will load up in here as well. And you can see there's just tons and tons and tons of stuff in here. And so when you see that Complete comes with like X amount of gigabytes of sounds, the reason why it says that is because it's talking about all of these instruments that come over here on the left-hand side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close that browser over there on the left so we don't see that browser, and we're just going to focus on the main window here in Kontakt. And I'm just going to grab a sample from over here on the left, and I'm going to make sure I grab a drum loop. So we'll go in here, we'll go to, let's go to the Pajama Beats. I like these a lot. These are kind of weird sounding drum loops and different loops of things. Go to Electronic Beats. Alright, this one's cool, so I'm just going to drag it into my Kontakt instrument, and it just lands right here in Kontakt. And you can see it automatically makes a new instrument inside of Kontakt. Sorry, sneeze. Alright, so now let's just take a look at this. What we're looking at here inside of Kontakt is, here it has our output, and you can have different outputs going on. You can have a bunch of different outputs, however many you have set up. You can change that if you want. I usually don't. In here you've got your MIDI channel, and again you can have 16 MIDI channels, or up to 64 MIDI channels actually. But really you're not going to use all these unless you're doing some kind of very specific thing. Here's your voices, max voices, and voices means how many different notes you can play at the same time. So in this case I can play up to 32 notes at the same time. If you don't need to have that many, I can go ahead and turn that down. I can double click it and just hit 1 or 2. If it's a drum loop like this, probably don't need that many, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn that up to like 8 or so. I don't need it to be 32. 32 would be more for like a piano or something like that. Here you can see how much memory and RAM your sample instrument is currently taking up. You can see it's currently taking up 120 kilobytes. That's because this is not a very long loop. And over here where it says voices, this is how many notes we're currently playing at the same time. So right now if I just hit one note on my keyboard, I'm currently playing one sound. If I hit 2 notes, right, I'm currently playing 2 different voices here. And I could have a maximum of 8 voices here. If I want to purge my samples, I can purge all my samples out, I can reload all my samples, I can update my sample pool, stuff like that, and that has to do with what samples are loaded into your sampler here. And then I can also make snapshots of things. I can click on this and I can load different snapshots, but you can see here it doesn't have any snapshots. And snapshots are kind of like presets for your different, like using that kind of sample bank. Over here I have a solo button, a mute button, and these are really only useful if you're using multiple instruments in here, so generally you don't have to worry about that too much. And then I've got my tuning here, so I can play my note, and I can tune it down, or I can tune it up. Right, there's that. I can pan left and right, left and right. And if I want to default anything back to the beginning, to its default state, I hold down Command and I click it, or probably Control click on the Windows machines. Over here is my overall level output. And by default, it starts at -6. If I wanted to not see all the information about this instrument, I can click on that button, the minus button right here. I can see my aux sends, which we're not really going to get into because that's a deeper thing for Kontakt. And I can also get rid of the instrument by clicking the X button, and it's going to ask you, do you want to save changes to the instrument? You can hit no or yes, or you can hit cancel to stop that part. Okay, so we got that there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little wrench here, and the wrench will allow me to open up my Kontakt, the instrument in here, and I can see all the different parts of this instrument and what's going on with it. Okay, so I've got this here, and I'm going to go in here to my, first of all, I'm going to go to my wave editor on my instrument, and you can see everything that's going on. Now, one thing I want you to listen to is, and you can see it right here as well, as I hit the wave, as I hit the button, my key, you can see the playhead goes through and shows me what I'm actually listening to. And you can hear it as I let go, it takes a while to fade out here. That's because I have an envelope set down at the bottom of my screen, down here, that has a long release on it. So my envelope down here by default comes up with this long release, and I don't want to have that long release. I'm going to go ahead and turn that all the way down. So now it just plays. You can hear that it's a much sharper release. If I put that back up to where it was, I can make it longer, and it takes longer to fade out. So I don't want to do that. I want to go ahead and make that quick. And that's this bottom one down here. And once I've done that, I really don't need this anymore for right now. I don't need to worry about this right now. It's not something I need to mess around with. So I'm just going to go back up here and go back to my wave editor. And in the wave editor, remember in the last video we just talked about the sample start and the sample end. That's the sample start is this little green flag right here, and I can move that over, and if I move that, I can go ahead and mess with that there. Right. So I can do that. I can also zoom in using these plus and minus keys here. So I can move this over here. Right. So you can see, you can kind of get into that and kind of mess around with that. Let's go ahead and put that back at the beginning. Then if I go over here to the end of my sample, my ending flag here, you can see and you can hear it'll stop wherever I tell it to stop. Right, so we have all those different things we can do with it. I'm just going to go ahead and put all the way over to the end of things. And up here we got some information about it here. The format here is 4401, is 44.1K, and then 24-bit. The length is 6.86 seconds. The end part is here. The sample part is here. The sample modulation, I don't ever use that one there, so that's probably to do with something to make it more kind of start and stop at different points, like automatically. And this has the name of the sample we're working with here, and I can scroll through that folder that I'm in to grab different samples. Alright, so once I've got that here, there's also these different buttons up here that you can set stuff here for setting up your zones and things like that. This is Kontakt 6, which I literally just got last week, so there's some different stuff in here that I haven't really messed around with. But we can go in here, we can set, we can make it so it loops. And what this is going to do is it's going to loop our playback here. Right. Well, if we play it from here, it'll loop the playback. Sorry, not from hitting the key. Stop it. Stop, 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 stop. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just triggering it from my keyboard here, and we're going to do the sample looping and stuff from down here on the bottom. But before we do that, we're going to go back to our mapping editor here, and we're going to grab this and just set it to map to certain specific keys. Now, there's three ways to do this. You can grab the yellow part here. This shows us our wave editor here. Or I can go over to this side over here, so I can see that right there. Or I can adjust my key range here. Right, so we can see that moving around there. Or what I can do, and this is what I'd recommend that you do, is I can set it with my MIDI keyboard automatically. So if I click on this button right here, this sets it to the left and the right with my MIDI keyboard. And in this case, I just want this beat loop to be on the one key here. So what I'll do is I'll just set this, and I'll just hit the same key twice, left and the right. So this is going to automatically set our low key and our high key. So if I hit this button again, and I play a different key, let me just show you my keyboard here. If I have this here, my keyboard, what I'll do is set up the, let me just show you this. There you go. So if I set a left key and a right key, you can see the key zone grows. It sets like that. So I'll go back over here. I'll set a lower left key. So it's a lower key and a higher key on the right. So you can see I can adjust my key zone just by hitting keys on my keyboard, which makes things a lot easier. So I'm just going to hit that one twice. There we go. All right. All right, so I've got that there. Now, what I can do is I can drag another beat loop in here, and I'm just going to drag the same loop in here. Let me go ahead and just change how we're looking at this again. I'm going to drag, they've got this one in here, right, different parts of it here. So I'm just going to drag all these in here like this. And one thing is when you're dealing with Kontakt, see how when I mouse lower, it restricts the key zones automatically, and when I mouse higher, it moves those key zones up like that. So by dragging in and putting the key zone right where I want it, it means I don't actually have to come in here and mess around with stuff too much, which makes my life a little bit easier. So I'm just going to drag this in like this, move this around, that, boom. So now I've got very specific keys on here. I'm going to go over here on my push, move that around, okay. Right. So you can see as I press the keys on my keyboard, it's going to play these specific samples. So let me go ahead and pull up the keyboard in the center here. Boom, there we are. Okay, so if we look, let's put this over on the side over here. So now I can hit these keys on my keyboard. And you can see it's going to play these samples depending on which key I hit. And so these are my different key zones that are playing individual samples. And these are all part of the same group. So I've got this in here. And now let's go back to our wave editor. And let's go ahead and I'll click on whichever one I want to use, and I can auto select my group here. But I'm just going to go ahead and click on this one. And I'm going to set these loops up one by one. So down here we can see I've got these loops, and here's how you set up loops in Kontakt. Let me just zoom in on this for you. Put this back like this. So I'm going to zoom in. And in here, go to my sample loop where it says sample loop right here, and I'm just going to click the 1 button, and it's going to turn that loop on, and it's automatically going to be set up for a loop. And if I hold this down forever and ever and ever, it's just going to go ahead and keep looping. And if I go over here to another sample, so we got this one here, go down to my wave editor, I'm going to keep them both on the screen at the same time. And this one here, again, I'll hit the 1. And that's just going to loop until I tell it to stop, until I let go of the key on my keyboard. Got that one there. Let's click on this one. Hit that 1 again. Now, the reason why there's 8 numbers here is because you can have 8 different sample loops happen. And you can have it so it plays one sample loop for a minute, and then it comes back and it plays a different sample loop, and it kind of moves around to give your samples more of an organic feel. This is great if you're sampling like longer sounds, keyboard sounds, pads that evolve over time, but it's not something that I use too much for drum loops like this. Okay, so I got that. So now what I can do, I can play these different sounds at the same time. So if we look at my hands, what my hands are doing right now, I can play different notes in combinations to play these different loops. So this one here is everything. This one here is just my hi-hats. This one's the kick and the snare and the hi-hats. This one's the kick and the snare. And this one's that kind of weird percussion sound. So what I would do is I can have like this one here is this. And then add that one in right there. And then add or I can have just these two here. Right? So you can play these different things in different combinations of each other. So going back into Kontakt here. Going back into Kontakt, I can set these up in different ways. Now let's go ahead and set this one up so it has a different loop here. And this is kind of a cool thing, not kind of a cool thing, it's a very cool thing with Kontakt, how you can set these loops up. It has this thing in here called grid. And the grid allows you to set up, allows you to lock your editing into a grid. We can see here this says the tempo is 140. I know the tempo is actually 70 because it just went too fast by double time because that was closer to 120 here. But let's go ahead right here. What I can do is I can adjust my start and end points here. And I can have it be very specific. So I can have it just loop this last here. And I love doing stuff like this. I often do this stuff in my productions. Just like that. So let's go ahead. I'm going to change this tempo here to 70 and put my metronome on. So now I can play it. Right? So if I go ahead and record that in, now if I wanted to add the kick and the snare loop on top of it, I can add it into the same clip by hitting the overdub button, up in the middle of the screen. I'll just go ahead and do that now. And now you can hear how I'm playing that beat loop a lot different how it was originally programmed. by starting and stopping these notes at different times. And this is like very, very basic of using these samples, but it's kind of the beginning of everything, right? So I can go in here and let's see here. Let's say this sample right here, we don't want the whole sample, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my wave editor again. I'm going to go in here and move this over, and we're going to grab, let's turn on the grid, put the grid to 70, because I know that's what it is. And I'm just going to grab a certain part of this. I'm going to loop this part here, but I'm also going to start my sample start point to that part as well. So now, and now I've just got that loop right there. So I've got that, and I can play that into the same clip. Cool. And now I've got that loop going on in there. Now, one thing about this is keep in mind that when you're messing with this stuff, is that you don't have to hold the note down for the whole time. I'm actually holding the note down for the whole time with all these. Let me go ahead and just mute these out. But if I wanted to, I could program this in so it does different stuff. Right? I can have it play these different notes like this. And here it makes that more interesting. Turn these on. Right. Have this come in as well. So the oranges are all coming from you, recorded from your controller. Yeah, those are my MIDI notes. That's like what you've been, that's hopefully what you've been working with during the assignments in Ableton Live. These are the notes that you've been programming in. And that's just from me hitting keys on my keyboard. Or using your pencil tool. You know, if you have your pencil tool like that, you can use your pencil tool. It's the stuff we talked about, was that I guess it was 2 weeks ago. We started talking about that stuff. So yeah, that's what we had talked about 2 weeks ago. And if you have the orange bars, yeah, these are the notes. Yep. So these are just playing different keys on my sampler, which is in turn playing different samples. And I've got that stuff set up right here. That's these right here, playing different notes. Okay, so. So if I take this, let's make another sample. Let's actually, inside here, I'm going to go ahead and drag that singer, the female vocalist here. Actually, let's not use that. Let's use the flute. There's this like flute here, which is pretty cool. Flute. Dirty flute, there we are. And let's go in here to loops. And let's use a loop. Okay, so we're going to use this one here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this and drag it in. So I got this here. Now, a couple things. One, you're going to see that this loop is different tempo from all these other drums. See here how it's like faster than all the other drums? Well, The reason why it's faster is because, and we can see this over here, it's at 80 BPMs rather than 70 BPMs, which is all my other samples. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to just slow it down, and the way I'm going to slow it down is by tuning it down. So remember, you can adjust the tuning in here, and remember, the tuning, a lower tuning makes it go slower. So if I go over here and I just push this, and you just have to use your ear. And you can hear that's pretty close. And if you want to hear a little bit more easily, it's probably easier just to turn on the metronome here and just play it with the metronome. You can hear it's still a little bit fast. 2, 3, bop, bop. Yeah, it's again somewhere in the middle there. And it says, Andre says, so does an EWI, for example, read the MIDI the same way since you are using air instead of your fingers? That's a whole different discussion. Let's talk about the EWI in Zoom, okay? Because that's like a conversation. I want to show you a few things. That's like a deep dive. That's like a whole different thing. And that's like that's more in a discussion talking about different controller types, which we will definitely talk about different controller types. But let's come back to that. So turn it up a little bit. You talking about the flute? Turn the flute up a little bit, or turn everything up a little bit? So I'm just going to turn the flute up a little bit here because that flute is a little bit soft. So what I'll do here is I've got this one selected, and see here, so it says volume. I can go ahead and grab that, turn that up without turning up the other drums. So let's listen to this, 2, 3. Right, it's still a little bit slow. Right, so that's pretty close. And then what we're going to do here is go ahead and play that in. So I'm going to play that in on top of this one here. I'm going to rename this one here. I'm going to call this one drum loop. And then I'm going to drag it down. I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to call this one drum and flute loop, like that. And in here, now another thing about this flute loop is I'm not really super happy with the start point on here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over here, and let's start it on one of these. Right, and I just change that start point there. So now I'm going to play it in. Turn that on. Okay, so there's that. Did I do 2? Did I not do enough? Oh yeah, I didn't do quite enough here. Let's go ahead and take these. Let's undo that recording. Let it play through. So we got that there. Okay, let's take this and move this over here like that. And I'm just going to drag these over. And I'm just going to adjust some of these here. I don't think there's anything more I can turn up on my side so much here. Are you, Damien? I mean, do you have headphones on? That's gonna help a lot. if you have headphones in your iPad. Without seeing your studio setup, I don't know what I can say to help you. But let's talk about that in Zoom, Damien. Let me just get through this because I'm almost done, and then I want to help you, but it's going to be like really difficult just to stop and to help you with that because I don't know what your setup is. I have to see your setup to really know how to help you with that, Damien. All right, so you do have headphones. Okay. All right. I don't know. Is anybody else having troubles hearing, or is everybody? I mean, how's it? I can turn this up here a little bit, but I want to blast out my voice. I want to have the music be loud enough. I mean, I can turn this up here for now, I guess. I'm just a little bit afraid. I want to hear other people's opinions on how loud it is. I don't know. I just turned it up a little bit right here in Ableton Live, so let me know if that helps. All right. Okay, and then we can come back to it and talk about it in Zoom. All right. So I have this here, and we're kind of messing around with this. Now, what I can also do, though, and this is a really cool thing, is I can take this one here, and I can... Oops, I can take this one here and zoom. Hold on, not zoom. That's what I just did. I can take this, and I can make a copy of this one here. So I'll go in here to this mapping editor here, and go to edit, and I'm going to duplicate the zone. I'm going to take it and drag it next to itself. So what I just did was I duplicated the zone. So let me just show you this real quick. Edit, duplicate zone. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Actually, I did not know that, Damien. I didn't know that one of your ears was damaged. So over here, I've got this here, duplicate zones. And in here, I just copied it and I put it on this other key here, and I can adjust the start point here. So now that one, I'm just going to go ahead and use this. And I'm going to take this one here, this note, and I'm just going to program this in. Like that. Boom. So now let's play that back. Right? And now I'm taking the sample and I'm chopping it up and I'm doing different stuff with it. And let me show you how to do that one more time. I'm just going to take this one here, and I clicked on whichever one I want to duplicate. Let's just go back to the first one here, the first flute one, and go up here, go to Edit, Duplicate Zones, click on that button right there, and it makes a duplicate of it. And what I have to do is I have to deselect it first, and you can see how this one's like a little bit more highlighted than the other ones. These are a little bit darker than this one here, is a bit brighter because it's got multiple key zones on top of it. What I'll do is I'll take and I'll just drag it over here to this note here, and you can put it on any note, it doesn't matter. I'm just using these keys because that's what my controller is set for. It's set for just C major. So I've just got it here on this one here, and now I've got it selected, and I'm just going to go down here to the bottom, and I can move the start point, and I can grab, I'm going to turn my grid on here. Let me make right, and that kind of helps out a little bit. Let's move. And if I hit play, I can go over here, and I'm just playing around and just listening to it, how it sounds. And I'm just going to grab this and put it right there and slow this one back a little bit like that. And this is what sampling can do for you. This is how you can use sampling. And this is like, you know, doing some pretty cool stuff here. So now, obviously, I just want to say one more time that I'm making this look pretty easy because I've been using samplers for a very long time. Like, I've been doing sampling. The first sampler I bought was in 1990, probably 93. I would say 92 or 93 was the very first sampler I bought, and it was an Akai SO1 sampler, which is a pretty garbagey sampler. It wasn't their best moment. And then I bought an eventually I ended up with I got an S2800, and then I got an S5000 eventually. So I've been doing it for a long time and messing around with these for a long time, and this takes a while to kind of know what you're looking at and kind of, you know, be able to get a feel for how things are going to sound and what you can do with it. But this is the basics of what you can do with these, and this is how Kontakt works. Kontakt goes a lot deeper. You can add effects onto these and sounds, then we get into the group editor, and all this stuff is in one group. I haven't put in stuff in different groups. Really what I would want to do in a case like this would be to take these groups and separate it out and put the flute in one group and the drums in a different group, and then I could add some distortion just to the flute or something like that. In here, I did not do it like that. But that's something you could do. Now, one last thing before we leave Kontakt here is I want to show you this DFD. DFD right here is in the source section, and what this source is, it's basically your sampler engine. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to mess around with the pitch and stuff, kind of like warping in Ableton Live. So I can mess with my pitch without adjusting my tempo, and vice versa. I can change my tempo without messing with my pitch. And Flawless Geo says fire. I agree, Geo. This is super fun stuff. So what we're going to do here is in here, oh, they got a new one here called Wavetable. That's cool. I don't know what I just did, though. I may have just messed up stuff. I'm going to turn that off of Wavetable, put it back into Sampler. So don't worry about Wavetable for now in Kontakt 6 if you get access to it. So in here, with the Sampler mode, you got Sampler and you got DFD. Now, Sampler, the difference between Sampler and DFD is Sampler loads all your samples into the RAM immediately. And this is fine for samples like what I'm using right here. But DFD actually loads the samples, just a little bit of each sample, and then plays the rest back from your hard drive. And this is what's used. This is how you can play big, long piano samples. This is why you can have an instrument that has 15 gigabytes of sample data, and you can play it from a computer that only has like 8 gigs of RAM. Because it's not going to load everything up into the RAM, it's going to load the beginning of each sample up into the RAM only. And let's go over here and take a look at this stuff here. So a couple of the areas for Kontakt, just to go through a little bit of review here, is the mapping editor, which is where you can set up your key and velocity zones, your root notes, stuff like that. Your wave editor is where you do the sample editing, loop setup, setting up your loop, set up the grid mode, stuff like that. Then you got your sampler engine, which you can set up in the source area, and we're going to talk more about that in just a second. And then in source sampler engine, you got natural modes and warp modes. So let's go over here and talk about that all that stuff there. So the sampler engine, this is, and most modern samplers have a way that you can do this, and it allows you to choose how the audio is played back, either natural or warped. So you can play back audio warped, so it disconnects the pitch from the speed. It's like Pro Tools Elastic Audio or Ableton Live Warp Mode, Flex Time, and Logic. And you've got natural mode, which is like the normal old school playback, which is when I play a higher kit pitch, it's going to play it faster and chipmunky. When I play a lower pitch, it's going to sound like Darth Vader or something like that. Keep in mind that warped playback uses more processing power than natural playback. A couple things with our natural modes. You have sampler, DFD, S1200, and MP60. Let's see if they've added more stuff, because let's see, sampler here. Do they even have this? Yeah, they got it right down here. So sampler, DFD, S1200, and then MP60. And what these two do, the S1200 and MP60, is it kind of recreates the bit depth and sample rate of the S1200 and the MP60 old, like the old MPC60 drum machine from Akai, or the SP1200 from Emu. Some old samplers, so you can get that kind of more old school sound. But there's a lot more that goes into it than just the bit depth and the sample rate. DFD stands for direct from disk, and that's this part right here. Right here. There we go. So what happens is, if you have a piano, for example, that has like 88 keys, for the most realistic sound possible, you want to have a sample for every key. And let's go back and load up that Alicia's Keys thing here. So, oops. Let's make this here, and I'm going to load up Kontakt. And I'm going to open up my browser, and we're going to go down and grab the Alicia's Keys. And it's going to load this piano in. And if I click on the wrench, we can see what's going on behind the scenes. So I can go look at my mapping editor. And now that you kind of know a little bit more about what you're looking at here, you can see this stuff. And you can see that it hasn't quite loaded everything up yet into the memory. It's still loading stuff up. And this is the thing, is that samplers, because they take time to load stuff up, you can't just like flip between your presets very easily with samplers. So what we've got here is, I can play these notes. And we can. All right, so you can see me playing that stuff. And in here, you can play all these different notes, but what's going to happen is this instrument is, okay, so the total sample size is 6.2 gigabytes, and I can see that down here on the bottom, my Alicia's Keys. Total instrument size is big. And let's go down here and look at some strings. The una corda 4.6. Which one is this one here? Strings Pro. Okay, here, let's play this one instead, actually. So this Ensemble Modern is down here in the bottom of my Kontakt window. You can see it's 17 gigabytes. Now, my computer has 32 gigs of RAM, so I can actually load the whole thing into my RAM if I wanted. Well, I don't actually know if I can force it to or not, but that's 17 gigs of RAM. Most computers that people buy are like 16 gigs of RAM, and so you couldn't load the whole thing up into it. And that's where DFD comes in. So first of all, if we look here, we can see there's this line creeping across the screen. This is how much it's loaded into my RAM. So we can go over here and we can just wait for it to kind of load everything in. And up here, we can see how many megabytes it's taking up. And so this is what's loaded into my RAM, is 349 megabytes. Well, that's a lot. And if I play it, you can hear it's a nice sound. It sounds really pretty. And what we can do is, here's how this works, is the first part of every sample is loaded into my RAM. And then after that, it's played back from my hard drive. So you want this stuff to be on a very fast hard drive, loaded into the RAM. It gets played back from the hard drive, and this is your sample length right here. So if we have the piano or these strings as 88 keys, every single thing is sampled, that would be like 3.5 gigs. We can see this is 17 gigabytes. So how do we play 17 gigabytes back? Well, you'll only load the first part into the RAM, which makes it only have like 300 or 400 megabytes loaded into RAM, and the rest of it's played back from the hard drive. And that's what DFD is. So it enables us basically to have these giant instruments being played back from like they work on computers that don't have a lot of RAM. So that's what DFD is. DFD is still normal stuff, but if I wanted to, let's go ahead and let's get rid of this Kontakt here. And let's go ahead and load in that vocalist again. I'm going to use the simpler instrument that comes with Ableton Live for this one. And let's go back into Sample Phonics and load in that person singing, Sarah G. And let's load. Okay, so let's load this one in. We'll drop it onto the sampler here. And if I hit play, alright, so I can load this in. Cool, so now what I can do is I can hit play. And you can hear that it's like not fast enough. So what I could do if I wanted to is I can play it up. But it's sounding, you know, it's changing the key, it's too chipmunky. So what I'll do is I'll turn on my warp down here, and now it'll lock into my tempo. And change that to complex mode. And you can hear what I'm doing with it. Here, let me just turn off everything else. And so I can go over here. And that sounds pretty cool there. And I'm changing the keys that I'm playing. Let me go ahead and show you what I'm doing here. Got my keys, different keys playing. And it's in the same tempo. So let me get my tempo here. And any note I play, right? Any note I play is going to be in the right tempo. Now, some of them sound better than others because the further you go away from that root note, the weirder it's going to sound. Warping is not perfect. It's only really good. But different instruments are better at it. Like Kontakt is really good at warping stuff. Ableton Live is good at warping stuff, not as good as Kontakt, I think. Kind of depends on what kind of audio you're using, though. So that's the basic rundown of these things. And then we're going to dive deeper into these as the week progresses. All right. So let's do this. Well, let me stop recording right now.